Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, this one's a little bit different. I sat down with Carolyn Tarr. She is the campus minister for DU Campus Ministry that I have been on the board for 6 years now, kind of doing various works trying to support them. Carolyn's done an incredible job with re-envisioning what campus ministry might look like out of Denver University and beyond. And part of that is this collective narrative project that she's putting together. It's a podcast, and they come here to Bethany to use some of our equipment. It's one of the ways we're able to support it. But so she had me on as a guest talking about this entire idea of sharing narratives. We get into a lot of different topics, as is always the case when she and I sit down. So it's a really fun conversation. One little warning, if you tend to watch this on YouTube in order to see how rapidly I'm aging through this process, there's no video component. They just do an audio podcast. So for those on audio, you won't notice a difference at all. But for those who are watching on video, it's going to just shift into some pretty images or something. But the audio will all be there. I really am excited to share this conversation with you. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good.
Welcome back to the Collective Narrative Project. Today, my guest is Nate Preisinger, who is a member of the pastoral team at Bethany Lutheran and the grant writer for getting the Bethany Lutheran podcast studio up and running. Nate comes to us as a board member of the foundation and as an essential thought partner for me as we are reimagining what faith formation looks like, sounds like, feels like in 2026. On today's episode, we'll be really exploring different ways that Nate and Bethany Lutheran have used digital storytelling as a means to reach more people through their ministry. But we'll also be tackling and talking about what has happened in crises of faith and how do we think about the processes required to bring faith back to a broader population of people. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to the Collective Narrative Podcast. I'm Caro, your host, and today we're sitting down with one of my board members, Nate Preisinger, who's also one of the pastors here at Bethany Lutheran and part of the people responsible for putting in the Bethany Lutheran podcast studio. Welcome, Nate.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I've never been on this side of the table.
I was actually just going to ask you that. I was just going to ask, am I sitting in your chair? I don't know which seat.
I mean, I sit in different places, but it's the metaphorical. I've never sat in the interviewee spot, so glad to be here.
It's great to have you here, and great to have you also on the board. We'd love to hear a little bit actually about how the podcast studio got up and running and what was your kind of why to repurpose the space in that way.
Yeah, what a great question. I mean, so we are Bethany Lutheran is a sub-grantee of something called the Narthex Grant. And so the Narthex Grant was given to Christ Church Denver, which is an Episcopal church on University Boulevard. It used to be pretty connected with DU Campus Ministry stuff. And as a part of that, they needed sub-grantees. And the whole idea behind the grant is expanding digital ministry in mainline congregations. Mm-hmm. So they were looking for a way to help mainline congregations just find new ways to get their message out there in the digital space. And so as a part of that, we did a whole bunch. Part of being a sub-grantee meant we got to do a whole bunch of strategic planning with this organization that kind of came in to help us process what we're doing, what our priorities are. And then from that, we also got a little bit of funding for whatever digital initiative we wanted to attempt. Mm-hmm. And I had been doing a podcast at Bethany since during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So I started here as a pastor in the December of 2019. And then I like to joke that everyone stopped coming to church as soon as I arrived. And I think for a lot of clergy at that time, you're kind of sitting around wondering like, what does ministry look like now? How can this work? And so that's where the podcast idea originally started. And then it kept going and grew. And then when this grant came along, it allowed us to really expand what was possible and the professionalism by which we approached the podcast. So yeah, that's not a very quick story, but gives you a sense of how it all came to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a really important initiative. I mean, especially during the pandemic, we understood that we needed new ways to be able to connect and use different communication tools. But post-pandemic, I'm curious about, how do you think of the story of telling the story of Bethany Lutheran, or how do you think of what and how and why you want to share digitally?
Yeah, more than anything, there's a bunch of pieces to that puzzle. What I'll start with is just saying that the digital space is huge and vast, and there's a lot of not great stuff on there. And there's been actually a lot of information and research about how our social media companies have specifically designed the algorithms to keep us angry and feeling inadequate, because that keeps us engaged in those spaces.
Right.
And so a lot of what I think I'm trying to do now with Bethany's social media and podcasting ministry is just to be putting things out there that can be like the palate cleanser. Just some aspect of good news. We have this incredible gift called the gospel, and I really think it matters for people's lives. That just feels like it's doing something different to the digital space. Even if it's small, even if not a lot of people encounter it or view it necessarily, it's still trying to put something good out there into the world, which I guess is the simplest way to put it. The other piece that I'll say that I just really love about the podcast element is I really use it as a way to get to know my members in the congregation too. We have so many cool people here at Bethany, and to think about their story, their areas of expertise, and to bring them in and for them to then feel like their story is valuable and affirmed. It's so fun as a pastor to have that focused space with a member, because so often my interactions is more a handshake on the way out of church or a big crisis moment where they need me to show up. And this can just be the space like, hey, tell me your story. And then I can ask questions and it doesn't feel weird because it is an interview.
Right. And that relational building component when people are not in crises is, such a huge part of ministry. And also, I think just a huge part of where we're seeing some missing gaps in society is that, do we have time to slow down and really get to know someone through their story? Or are we only addressing topical things as they come up?
The way you say that though, I can just hear in the way you're framing it. I want to ask you a question. Is this part of the idea behind this storytelling project for the foundation?
I felt like I wanted a space where multiple different people could come and share how their story contributes to this bigger story that we're all collectively composing. And I think that we're in this moment where we need a lot of other spaces to practice and play, doing things imperfectly, doing things without the funding that we necessarily need, but having a willingness to just start, because that is what defines story.
But what I hear in that too, it's so rooted in generosity. Right. Which is what I love about it, because you're right. We often think of it as I need the money to format, to do the thing. And if I don't have the money, then I can't do it. And so how can we just be generous with the stories that we have in the sharing of them and allow that to be enough?
Right.
And there is, it's interesting too. This podcast studio. It's a story of generosity where the Lilly Foundation gave a chunk of money to Christ Church, and they, as part of their plan, wanted to distribute it to other mainline congregations so we can learn more together. And then I show this to you to say hey, could this be of any help to DU? It's a perpetuating of the generosity.
Exactly.
And that's a better story to tell.
It's a story of grace. I think what's been really, really fascinating to me, moving back to America, being back in American culture, and at a time when we are very it seems like we're like cellularly dividing. And I understand that cells divide to grow, right? That is actually a true thing. We split and we grow. But I think what's interesting is, are we growing together or are we only working to grow apart? And I feel that faith spaces have a really important role to play in regrowing something that is connected. Even as the word faith has become something that no longer has a place in 2026 as knowledge has become bigger. We've forgotten that all these spaces kind of have room. It's been really great working with you here at Bethany Lutheran because it's been much more, hey, there's this really great space.
Yeah.
Let me tour you around the spaces, and then you can let us know how those spaces kind of fit into the bigger project or the bigger story that you're working to tell. And I think that invitation really gave me an opportunity to think about what spaces help to advance the story that we're trying to grow from the foundation.
And it's not just the foundation story that's advancing.
Right.
Because I get to go to the council and tell the story as well. It's like,
Right.
hey, DU Campus Ministry is using the podcast studio. And that is a good story for us too, because it makes them aware of like, wait, there's a campus ministry at DU? It's like, yes, I've been involved with it for a long time. Thank you for listening. But suddenly this is more real to them because it's happening in our space.
Right.
On a Wednesday morning, usually, right? Like there's a temporal location to it,
Right.
that they can put their finger on.
Right.
I see that happening now in the stories that we tell, because it's gotten my council all of a sudden thinking like, hey, what else can we be doing to support campus ministry, which invited a whole new level of conversation
Right.
that wouldn't have happened if not for this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm consistently in this process as we're trying to do something new and different, which is messy and difficult, and you take a few steps forward and then you take a bunch of steps back and you try something and it doesn't work. And, you feel that personal component of like, oh my goodness, like then maybe I'm failing at this if X didn't work, which is just not true. Right. Like as long as you're trying and choosing to walk your talk, you're going to stumble, you're going to fall. It's not going to be a perfect process. But I think some of the wisdom that's really shown up and that has really guided and is currently part of what we're rooting the foundation into is that first and foremost, if you're trying to do something different, you need to build relationships. And it's been funny because I'm like, okay, sometimes we think about, okay, the podcast needs to become, in a business terms, like that's going to be the marketing funnel. And it's like, for who? Like the 10 people, you know what I mean? It's like, who am I running through this marketing funnel if I'm not first thinking about the story and the opportunity to have people in the podcast studio with me, you included, Ben included in our work, doing the production side. If we're not first trying to figure out relationally, how do we understand each other's stories?
Well, and I hope you heard that. I mean, I've been doing the podcast for Bethany for 6 years now. Yeah. March 2020. And it's taken me a long time to kind of get to that point. But in the way I described it for you, right? It's like, no, it's about building the relationships with the community members. And it's about putting something faithful into the digital space. And I always like to joke when people ask about the podcast, I'm like, we have dozens of listeners.
That's more than us. That's more than us. You're well on your way.
And it might not ever be much more than that. And that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But also like that ripple effect that you're speaking to, I think that is a ripple effect of relationship building. And it's not going to look like the same success metrics as, someone who's on Wonderly and trying to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in, ad revenue and these other
do we
pieces.
need to break for a Casper mattress head? We should probably do that right now.
We should probably do that right now. Do we have anything to plug? But I think that's the piece is it's just like, okay, if I don't have that, or if I don't know how to do that piece of the business, then I shouldn't do the podcast. And I think what has been the kind of unlearning and relearning is, having an open dialogue, whether it's with someone else, or even if I came in here and just videotaped myself and had a conversation with myself, it's an opportunity to deepen our relationship with our faith, our relationship with God, our relationship with the external world, because it's a processing mechanism.
Right. And to that point too, like all about story. Christianity is a religion built on story in so many ways. And I think inherent within that is just this understanding of the sacredness of individual stories, which is what I love about this project. But it's funny, especially I would think in a campus setting, like if you went up to students and you're like, hey, like tell me your story, they'll be freaked out.
Right.
They'll be creeped out about it. But if you invite them, like a podcast is this container space almost. Exactly. Where it's okay to ask those questions. I mean, then similarly with congregation members, I don't know how much they'd be willing to like tell me their story.
Right.
But if they know it's like in this more formal space, then they're a little more willing. And I mean, it comes with its own barriers too, where there's probably certain parts of their story they don't want to share and have recorded for all eternity. But in the same sense, it's opening the door. And then I can follow up after the podcast to ask more about it. It creates that storytelling, story sharing holder. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that your point too of there has to be places to ask questions.
Yeah.
And I think that what's been interesting, even as that information, knowledge centric society has really come into like, this is mainstream culture, how frequently we still are going to have questions that are rooted in the mysticism of faith. Mm-hmm. And yet we still are, we're caught in this logic model that, oh, well, then that's not an appropriate question to have. If I can't seek an answer, then I don't want to ask the question. And I'm curious for yourself,
sure.
What are some seeking questions? Like you are a pastor, but you must still have questions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm always wondering about what it is that causes people to connect with faith. And you and I have talked about that a lot off, not on a recorded podcast, but it just seems so fascinating because it's such a strange convergence of experiences and then how an individual chooses to process those experiences.
Right.
So that might not be exactly where you were going. Like if you want like a theological question, I can give you that too, but that occupies so much of my thought space. So I just have to be honest about it of like, why did I stay in church and neither of my sisters did? Mm-hmm. 'Cause we all had very similar experiences, but we processed them differently.
Right.
And why, I mean, there's so much written about the decline in church attendance, et cetera, et cetera. What is it culturally that's making that happen? And it might actually be a good thing in a lot of ways, because maybe 2 generations ago, people were just doing it out of duty and it didn't actually matter or mean anything. So I'd much rather people be authentic with what they're feeling and believing than just going along with it.
Right.
Is that what you were looking for? Do you want something deeper?
No, I love that question because but even for me, it spurs for me my own kind of processing. And I will definitely say that in my process, 100% encounters in nature are a huge piece of being able to be in a space where I could hear and feel that soulful nourishment that I was seeking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so kind of coming back to the United States, that was one of the first things that I was really seeking was a village style community where you've got lots of different generations, lots of different people, different social economic backgrounds, different backgrounds of culture, that kind of come together on a frequent basis and decide to hold space for each other simply because you're proximally located.
Yeah.
And for me, that was something that I'd really found in the village. It wasn't something where I was living in Kenya. It wasn't something that I found in a church community, but it was something I found just in the actual village community because that's how societally we functioned. You saw each other on a regular basis. You knew this person might do something that I dislike, but I'm going to see them in a few days' time and we're going to figure out how to navigate that together because they're not going anywhere and I'm not going anywhere.
I've never heard it church described in that way before, but I really appreciate it because you're right, especially in America, a village isn't really a thing. I mean, it kind of is, right? Like I know there's smaller rural towns that are a little more closely knit, but a church tends to be exactly what you're talking like this real overlap.
Right.
And it's a little different because it tends to be that people are only there once a week, probably not even that often, actually. It's more like every other week, once a month. But it does create this space. One of the things I love about Bethany is there's a lot of diversity in the sense of socioeconomic and political affiliation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really interesting space to inhabit at this point in time.
It's extremely important.
And it's neat because there's been a lot of opportunities for people to take their toys and go home, and they've chosen to stay and continue to invest, even when they're upset with something I said or didn't say, or one of the other pastors.
Right.
But the community is more important. And learning from each other, which is what we're always trying to talk about too, is that I can learn so much more from someone with a different viewpoint than I can from someone who just kind of is coming from the same space.
Completely.
And that's what the village can provide.
Yeah. And the village requires us to agree to disagree and still move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that I still feel that, we're in this moment where it's like, if you don't agree with me 100%, or if you don't even tell me that you agree with me how I want you to tell me you agree with me. Mm-hmm. And if all of those conditions aren't met, then you're never going to see me again. Or then we don't have relationship. And I find, I find these lessons of relationship just kind of keep appearing as, not necessarily a challenge, but as like God coming forward and saying, this is what we're trying to relearn. And I'm here in the presence of this as the Spirit so that we can relearn that type of relationship.
I'm going to ask you a question kind of related to all this, because it's part of, and maybe it's coming back to your original, like, what questions do you have? And this is part of what I wonder about as well. What you're describing is really hard.
So hard. Learning
how to love and care for a neighbor and another person. And I really feel like the Christian story is a collection of, insights, etc., that helps like kind of deconstruct us so that we can get to that place. Now, the Christian story does not usually get presented in that way. It's more about like, hey, you just need to be good. And if you can just be good, like just do these things. And it's very narrowly defined morality.
Right.
That's like, don't swear and don't do drugs and don't have sex before marriage. Like if you can do that, then you're good.
Right.
And now, but what that does is it just makes you, if we present Christianity in that way, it just reinforces an ego-driven path forward. And so it's like, yes, I'm going to love my neighbor because I was told to, but then you don't really actually love your neighbor, and you're definitely not willing to learn from them, because what if they're doing morality wrong?
Right.
So we have to unlearn that like view of reality in order to then appreciate the love, the grace that's been extended to us. And that's a much better place to live from in extending it to someone else. So anyway, long preamble to the question, which is, do you need to do it in a certain order?
I think my gut reaction
please,
is first and foremost, how do we get people simply to show up?
Correct. Because if you start and say like, no, you need to be a disciple of Jesus to learn the Jesus way. Like, no one's coming to that.
I think the other piece is it's like, what will people show up for? Because we know people are seeking something more.
Right.
Right. And so if there's a protest or there's something else, people are going to show up because we want to stand in solidarity with each other. We want to feel a collective vibration that only happens when multiple people show up at the same time. Mm-hmm. But I think what's interesting is that we're kind of in this moment where we've got, which comes first, that question.
Yep.
And also like, how do I reach people to let them know they could show up for this and convince them before they show up that it's not going to be XYZ. Mm-hmm. And I think that like we end up getting really caught in how do we communicate the message of what this is, as opposed to maybe I don't necessarily know what it is, but I know if you show up, you're going to feel better.
Yeah.
Or I know if you show up, you're going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
And then how do we do that piece of collectively telling the story of, okay, tell us what you got from this.
Yeah.
Well, Nate, we're going to see you again on here. We're going to hear from you again. You know where to
find me. Down the hall.
Thank you so much for letting us use the podcast studio, for being, you know, on the forefront of wanting to bring more digital ministry out there. And thanks for being on the Collective Narrative Project.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.